Yay, we're here. I'm so excited to have my guest on My Life is a Typo, Divergent Dialogues for Change. Today, my guest is none other than Nayela Amaru. I just wanted to start off by thanking you for your presence. That is gift enough for me.
Oh, Davi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation, and really looking forward to the next 30 minutes or so in space with you.
Awesome, awesome. So, if I may be so nosy, what's been the best part of your day or your week thus far? It being Friday today.
Absolutely. Well, I like to refer to Fridays as Friday. And this this has been a particularly good week. It's always a hectic week in the advocacy spaces, but I was able to go and support some really amazing organizations at their press conferences. Went to a few rallies, went to a few bill signings that really, I think speak to the heart of what I do of trying to engage people in everyday advocacy to help build a better and more equitable New York. And this is just a great way to end another great week in the advocacy spaces.
Well, thank you for all you are and all you do. In fact, I know that you wear many different hats. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for several years now, and it may actually be a challenge for me to describe who you are in a nutshell and what you do. So I'm not going to take that from you. I don't want to steal your thunder. So when people ask you what you do professionally, what is it that you say? Like what titles do you use or what words do you use? Maybe in addition to advocacy.
I love that question because I do not fit into I don't fit neatly into any one particular box. I imagine it might be part of my millennial background. We wear all the hats, sometimes at different times, sometimes at all the times. We are all the things.
Mhm.
But essentially, no matter what hat I'm wearing, it's essentially to build grassroots governing power through policy advocacy, issue campaigns, and elections. And so my career and my work is really focused on fighting for equitable policies. In my line of work, I focus on policies through a racial equity and gender justice lens. Issue campaigns, which really taps into the need to mobilize grassroots to build education and awareness on social issues. And elections, right? So I also train women to run for office, teaching them the mechanics and the politics. I've worked on a variety of different electoral campaigns at the different levels of government across a few different states, trying to get good people into office, which makes my work as an advocate that much easier.
Mhm. That's awesome. And um, how did you get into this line of work? Because I went to school with a lot of folks who said this is what we want to do, and some ended up going into that line of work, and some didn't. And no judgment there, just an observation. But it always makes me curious of like, how did you? What was the genesis story? How did you even start with this, field or this calling? Really, it's more of a vocation.
I love that question. I was supposed to be a journalist, and then I was supposed to be a public interest lawyer, changing the world one court case at a time. But that's not how my story ended up being written. It was just a variety of different life experiences that I had, um, all really touching the reality of being invisible and being without power. And learning firsthand the consequences and how painful that can be when you are navigating spaces, when you're navigating society in a world, when you are invisible and feel powerless, right? And so, what really sparked, I think, my intentionality of wanting to create and expand spaces to empower people who felt like I felt at one point in my journey. I really just wanted to focus on that empowerment aspect, using policy as my preferred tool. Again, kind of moving in between the grassroots spaces and government. Again, with a focus specifically on underserved communities, is how I think I fell into, if you will, more so than just me recognizing how I wanted to share my time and my talent to empower people, rooted in a very personal lived experience of being invisible myself.
you are, when I think of you, I think of you as somebody who empowers others, but gives voice to those who may feel voiceless, and kind of shares your power and your influence as well. Not somebody who hoards it, but shares it, and in so doing, amplifies it for all, right? So it's a very additive and sort of, I don't know, generous, certainly generous process. Who were the people in your own in your own journey who kind of showed you that this is a viable path, that this is an important, noble path? Like, were there, dare I call it, muses or people who kind of inspired and lit your way?
You know, as we live our lives, you know, we notice we notice things, we notice people. It's, you know, I think every moment, every situation, every chapter, every season can teach us something. And I like to be a student of people. And so many people I've come across in different chapters of my life, in different spaces, where I've learned from and been inspired from. And most often, quite frankly, David, these are people that you'll never read about in the history books. You won't see their names in the newspaper. You'll never see their faces on television. I've learned so much just from everyday people um, who want to show up in the way that they can, in the ways that they can, to help build better communities for their children, for themselves, for their families, not just for this particular moment in time, but for generations to come. It has more for me been a process of being inspired by the people who are doing the work every day and learning to do my work a little bit better, a little bit differently. Again, from the people who are doing this every day. Again, and there's so many different ways to building power, to building a more inclusive democracy. I'm just a sponge learning from everyone that I cross paths with. And so that would be my answer. Not any one particular person or even a group of esteemed elite people, but really just so much inspired and learned so much from people who do this work every day.
That is a very, first of all, that's a very diplomatic answer, but also I think a very real answer. In my life, the, you know, the at this point, thousands of people that I've crossed paths with, there's something I've learned from every single one. I do believe in the quote, I am a student and I am a teacher. In other words, with everyone, like everyone is my student, everyone is my teacher. That's a quote that
Absolutely.
I've butchered already, but I feel I embody because it's true. And listen, it doesn't mean that every single engagement and every single interaction is going to be life changing, but every person, you know, every little interaction can be informational, educational, inspirational in some way, in some big or small way. So, so you do a lot, right? You like you said before, you do a lot of different type of work in different spaces. You are active in so many different arenas. Um, I, you know, this question may actually be challenging for you, but I'll ask it anyway because I like to challenge. So, if you kind of look back at everything that you've done so far up until, you know, 4:17 p.m. today, what is it that you're most proud of so far?
You may think this is diplomatic, but it is absolutely the truth, David. I've secured millions and millions in budget securities for, you know, campaigns that I've run. I've passed many bills into law. Again, with issue campaigns, I've led and have worked on. I've helped some really good people get into public office, which I'm very proud of. But without question, every time I'm asked this particular question, my answer remains the same because it speaks to my why. What I am most proud of is when I'm able to challenge people to reimagine their own understanding of power, particularly with the communities that I work with, right? So often, due to so many different systems of oppression, discrimination, all the isms and all the obias that we deal with, right? Depending on our identities, delegated and chosen, right? And how we're perceived in this world. Um, when I'm able to walk with someone on their journey and to see their own I think, progress in recognizing that they are not powerless. If you look at it through a very specific lens that's traditional and very hierarchical, and very formal, that's how people understand themselves to be without power. But as an organizer, right, I'm always in the process of redefining power so that we can build power, so that we can exercise power, right? And to be with someone on that journey, and for to be part of such an incredible transformation when someone feels like they do not have a space in democracy because they don't matter,
Mhm.
to working with them on a campaign or inviting them to engage in a direct action that has a direct impact, right? That would not have been possible without their involvement. It's such an amazing moment that's not just mine, right? It's a moment that changes that person's life. Um, and that person oftentimes becomes an ambassador in a way that I don't need to bring their 5 friends, because they're bringing their 5 friends and showing them, hey, I was part of this thing, and I want you to be a part of this thing too, and we can build something new, through our collective engagement, through our collective power. And that's the thing that I'm always just so proud and honored to be a part of, because it's such a deeply transformational moment in someone's life,
Mm.
to recognize their own power, and that they've had it all along, and how to now expand it and to bring other people along in their journey of empowerment as well.
I think if it weren't 95 degrees here, I'd be getting goosebumps from what you just said. Okay. So I appreciate that. I think to me, it speaks about this idea that, there might be this myth, maybe myth that we have, that some of us may have, that in order to get power, we have to steal it or take it from somebody else. But here you are talking about this very innate and organic way of saying, hey, we have power, let's wield it, let's harness it, let's co-create it, let's build it together, let's build ourselves up. And that's a
Yes.
very, to me, just a very resonant and beautiful way of thinking about it, as opposed to kind of throwing our hands up in hopelessness, saying, oh, we don't have access to that power, let's give up,
Right.
or waiting for someone to save us, right? From the outside. So
Absolutely.
that, I appreciate that. Any other, um, call them misconceptions, when you kind of tell people what you do and maybe they don't fully understand what you do, any misunderstandings or misconceptions of the type of work that you do?
Oh, there's a lot of misconceptions. Um, some fairly understandable, and others were just like, you watch too many political shows on cable TV. I think as an organizer, right? I cut my political teeth as a tenant organizer, really on the ground. And I think sometimes our work is simplified to the people who chase you with clipboards asking you to sign on to a petition. That is a task in organizing. However, the greater purpose of an organizer, David, is to build power at a grassroots level, right? And we start that by engaging with different tactics such as, education, awareness, so on and so forth. Um, I think putting on my government relations hat as a public interest lobbyist, there is that negative, perception that we cut deals in the back room of some smoke-filled steakhouse, which, yes, does happen. However, most of us in the lobbying space really are driven by our values, and really always excited. I know I am when I have an opportunity to use my political sphere of connections to bring clients, community-based organizations, which are, who I focus on, into legislative conversation, right? And so I think that's really important to just to state explicitly. And working on campaigns, both electoral and issue, um, I think that sometimes people think about folks who work on campaigns as people who may not necessarily be able to hold down a regular 9 to 5 job. I've gone, stints. Campaigns are a sprint and a marathon all at the same time, right? You have incredibly long work days for a short amount of time. And there are some folks who they make a profession out of it. They'll move all over the country running campaigns. But by and large, those of us who work on campaigns on the electoral side, it's because we really do believe in the candidate that we're working for, right? By and large, at least for me, I don't bring on, I don't consult for a candidate whose vision, values, and legislative platform don't align with what I believe to lead us to a more fair and just New York. Are there consultants who work for the person with the highest paycheck? Absolutely, right? But by and large, I know for myself and for other folks in this field, we do want to support the candidate with their expertise, who we really do believe that once they are in office, it will lead to greater things for folks here in New York. So that's some of the I think most common misconceptions I'm aware of and have heard throughout my career about the different hats that I wear.
Well, I appreciate you being so forthcoming with that. And I'll actually offer as a coach and a career coach that, those who kind of are chasing more of the dollar sign or the money, that's really the same kind of is true of any other profession, right? Like I have people in, whether they're in marketing and sales, and some are just more driven about the metrics or the dollar amounts in their paycheck, and that's fine. It's no judgment, just what they share. And others are driven more about values or vibe or culture, or the ethos of a place or a mission. So
absolutely,
I think the reason why your line of work, folks in your line of work they're just under more scrutiny, and I think that there's even more pressure to try to be good at all times, and it's just, I think it's just under a finer microscope. That's what I think, right?
Absolutely.
What are the, other than, like, again, the helplessness that some people may demonstrate, or the sort of the inertia, what are some of the hurdles or the obstacles in your road in order for you to do the things that you do and do so well? What are some obstacles that you faced in the recent past, in recent months, or in recent years?
I will say, so I'm going to go one step further, because my challenges have changed as I've become more seasoned.
Mm.
When I first started out, as a woman of color, folks wanted to know, why are you in the rooms that you're in? So constantly having to show up and justify my existence for occupying space. When folks didn't necessarily know me, they may have known my work, which is why I was in the rooms they were in. But there was that constant, well, who are you and why are you here? As I've gotten older, and I think I don't say a little bit more out there, but my work has, I think, become a little bit more publicly acknowledged than when I first started out. Not so much the why are you here, although there's always going to be that level of isms and obias that women of color in particular always have to deal with to justify our existence, particularly in dominated male spaces. I think the challenge for me has become thinking more about legacy building, which excites me and scares me. I know a lot, and I think the challenge for me is figuring out what is the best channel for me to pour into this next generation of women, especially women of color, who want to do the things that I'm doing, but I've earned a lot of battle scars to learn the lessons I've learned. So what is the most seamless, effective, efficient way for me to teach what I've learned so that they don't have to be exposed to the wounds that I still carry, right? And I sit with that in terms of, as a profession, right? There's a lot of ugliness in this profession. I've been very clear in the values that drive my decisions and how I choose to show up in this work with integrity, and with faith in government that is empowered by everyday people. But I also know to our point that we just had in the previous question, David, not everyone shares that orientation in this space. And so while I have learned to navigate those complications for myself, I want to prepare the next group of women in these spaces who look like me, without having to subject them to some of the things that I've had to deal with, and quite frankly I'm still healing from, right? And so I think that's my challenge, is thinking about legacy. I've created my space, I own it, and I'm proud of what I've built, and who I built it with and for whom, but knowing that there's still so much work to be done, and how can I again kind of create that pipeline, so that the work can continue to be done, with a lot less pain, for women who look like me in this space.
Mm, wow. I'll also offer that I knowing you for some years, I think that, you know, that some of those battle scars you may and with good reason wear proudly, right? On yourself. It's like, hey, I've earned this, but I don't want you to go through this.
Yeah,
And so that's kind of, you
absolutely.
know, it's you are who you are because of that, right? For better and for worse. And it's just incredible that you're thinking and everything that you do from the moment that I started talking to you some years ago, it was always about serving other people. And that's something that immediately resonated, right? I didn't know it in what capacity we would connect down the road, but that sort of baseline ethos and mission was just like 100% resonating with me. Um, and so now that you're kind of thinking, you know, what's next, in terms of the next generations and so on, how can people who are resonating with this message, how can they kind of get involved with the type of work that you're doing? What are some sort of ways that they can learn more or get involved?
Oh, I love that question. So I'm going to answer that in two different ways. One of the most important questions I ask folks who I work with, and also ask myself, because depending on the season of life I'm in, the answer has changed and it continues to evolve. But thinking about, what does power, and specifically political power, mean to you? It can mean different things to different people. You know, when I was an organizer, you know, power was being able to organize a 5,000, you know, person march or rally, and being able to get press quotes and bringing awareness to the issue. Um, as you know, I've worked in different spaces. Political power has changed in terms of how I understood it. And there's no wrong or right answer, right? It's such a personal one. And so I would first say, um, define for yourself what political power means to you, because once you're able to define it, you're going to be able to answer, the next question, which is how do you build it and how do you exercise that political power? And the answer to those questions is going to determine how you can get involved, in all the spaces that I'm in, right? And so for some people, you know, it's as simple as showing up on election day or early voting. If you're here in New York,
Okay.
I encourage folks to vote early. Um, for some folks, it's, you know, writing, a letter to their local representative. For some folks, it's, you know, the more engaged direct action, organizing issue campaigns, really being front and center and spearheading, issues that impact them, their communities, however they choose to define it, through the electoral frameworks. And for some people, political power is built outside of electoral frameworks, which is absolutely fair and understandable. um, you know, the political frameworks that we live in here in the American context, I choose to build power the best way I can within it, within the structures that exist. But I absolutely support my rabble rousers, my dreamers who choose to build power outside of it, right?
Mm.
Because you need both, right? And I've gone back and forth between both spaces of being the rabble rouser advocate, you know, shaking my fist, dismantling the table, and then right back in government that has the formal power to make the decisions of government investment, right? And again, seasons of life, evolution of our answers as we learn and grow and live a little bit more. But that's what I would encourage folks to begin with as a starting point. You know, ask that question, what it means to you, how you can build it, and how you can exercise it at whatever chapter in life you are in.
That's beautiful. And what gives you hope, right? Because it's a challenging time. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. It's a challenging time in the kind of the political landscape. Um, what gives you hope? What grounds you?
The people I work with, advocacy is hard.
Mhm.
It is absolutely gut wrenching. It is soul crushing. It is emotionally draining, physically exhausting. And yet it is still why I choose to fight every day. The most rewarding, enriching, inspiring channel for me to connect with other people who share my North Star, who share my values that I use to guide my life and my career decisions and my work. And even at the lowest points when, you know, we've lost an election or the votes didn't go the way that we needed it to, there's always, again, defeat. It sucks, right? It hurts because you put so much of yourself into something that you believe in so strongly, and for it to be ripped away from you over something as superficial as petty politics happens all the time. But what also happens all the time is people continuing to show up every day, each and every day in spite of it. And I'm always just so thankful for the people who remind me in those moments that this work is long term. If it was easy, then you know, we wouldn't be fighting so hard to try and win it. But when we do win it, lives change. Generations change based off the work that we're able to do together. And that's really what inspires me and grounds me, is just the everyday people who choose to show up despite all of the messiness, because we're fighting for the future. And at the end of the day, that's really what grounds me and inspires me to not just be in these spaces, but to show up as much as I can every day to fight the good fight.
Wow. I mean, the North Star, one of the many things I appreciate about you is that laser focus on that North Star amidst all the nebulousness, amidst all the messiness and the chaos and the defeat. Just again, that focus on, you know, the ultimate goal and the mission, and that of serving others. I mean, you do such a good job of shining the spotlight on others and amplifying others, that I felt it was only right today for me to spotlight you, and I hope I did a decent job of that. So, you know, it was only fair and only right. You deserve a little bit of the spotlight as well. So just wanted to thank you for those eloquent answers, for those sort of passionate and heartfelt answers. I've got no other questions for you, but just gratitude, and thank you again for doing this with me. I appreciate you on so many levels. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David, for having me and for giving me the space to share some lessons I've learned along the way. And I hope that your listeners can take something from it to help them guide them on their journey as well. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, Nayela. Take good care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.